I am Dr. Mrs. Sunita Tiwari from CMT College, Bilaspur. I am taking up this chapter for the final year students, chapter 8, Women and Development. This chapter is written by Leela Dubey, and this is adopted from the article with the same title from the Developmental Problems of the Third World written in 1988. The students, the chapters of the book, they are written to generate knowledge and awareness and modern outlook and total view of life. The chapter deals with the fact that the proper development of society is possible when women, they are made a part of the development. From the title itself, we can understand women and development. The writer has taken up this issue about the development of women, which plays a very important role in the development of the country. The writer has dealt with this theme in a very systematic manner. In the very first paragraph, she takes up the issue from the Second World War, and she talks about the dramatic changes which come over the political and social order of humankind. She starts from the 50s, this decade of the 50s, which was dominated by the theme of liberty, when the colonies, they were getting independent, and the dependencies, they were emerging as independent states. All the states and countries, they were getting freedom. The decade of the 60s was dominated by the quest for development. After getting independence, next, another very important issue which was important for all the nations was development. The less developed countries of the world, they formulated plans to catch up with the advanced industrialized countries of the West. So this competition began, and it grew and developed for almost 10 years. In the decade of 70s, again we see that a change comes over in the theme of development. Here we find a very important theme of liberty, of equality, that begins to emerge, that begins to articulate itself in several areas, and particularly in the new gender assertion by women. And so we find that feminism emerged as a powerful movement which could not be wished away or ridiculed, that nobody could make joke about or laugh at such an important ism that was rising during this time. The basic demand of the feminist was simple, that was equality. And the main aim of feminism or this equality was that movement wanted to eradicate, to wipe out the scaly prejudices that had immobilized women in various spheres of activity. Because this was a kind of a hindrance, stopping them, not letting them grow in all the scenario of development. In the next stanza, the writer moves on to talk about the Indian social reform movements of the 19th and the early 20th century. And particularly she's talking about the contribution of Mahatma Gandhi, the freedom struggle movement started by Gandhi, and that brought a change in the Indian scenario. Here she is talking about the participation of women on a massive scale, huge scale, in the freedom struggle led by Mahatma Gandhi. It brought them out of their seclusion, because here up till now women were not given importance in society at all. It helped, this movement of Gandhi helped in loosening up and removing many social constraints and paved a way towards granting them political equality in the Constitution. And they got a right in the Constitution, equal right in the Constitution and in the structures and framework of the independent India. Now, after independence, the writer moves on to talk about that during the 70s, the gender question, sexual inequality, exploitation, these questions, they were raised dramatically and they became a major issue of contemporary debates. People started talking about the status of women, the condition of women, the equality, the rights that they should have. Women's status and problems, they came to occupy an important place in the research and action programs. This was not only happening in India, but this was a global trend. It was happening all over the world. In India as elsewhere, there is a vocal minority which professes to speak for the silent majority of women. But in India, just like in other parts of the world also, in many other nations also, there was only a minority, vocal minority. Vocal here means that people who stand up, who talk about it openly and raising up these issues, they were a selected few who would speak about the majority of women, but they were keeping quiet, not talking about their rights. Now, the writer says that when we want to talk about the development and women, we have to understand first of all that it would be hazardous to claim that women are women first and last. And the class, they are irrelevant as far as women's cause is concerned. Now here she is talking about the complex condition of the development in relation to women, because it is not so simple here. And here she says at the same time it would be wrong to say that there is nothing special about women that should warrant separate treatment, and that women could be subsumed in the general framework that is used for understanding inequality in the society and for explaining skewed benefits of development. Skewed means distorted. This is not the natural development that we are talking about, because only to talk about development for women and not taking into consideration that all the certain issues, the various issues which are related to women, it would be wrong in a way to say. So, a healthier and a fruitful approach would be to consider both sex and class as relevant as for understanding social inequality. So first of all, both the issues should be taken into consideration. What? Number one, there being a female and the class to which they belong. So both the things are equally important to understand social inequality of women. So the writer comes to this conclusion. She says that we have to take into account three important aspects or the major themes over here where we have to focus our attention on it. Number one, what is the first important theme that we should take into account? It is on the necessity of an adequate database covering the status and role of women to ensure more relevant and meaningful development planning for them. Number one, what is important? That we have to have adequate, sufficient database talking about the status and role of women. Number two, how development negatively affects women. We also have to take into account the second aspect, the second theme here, that how development negatively affects women. We talk about development, but somewhere or the other, they are not, the purpose of development is not served. And somewhere or the other, it is stopping their growth. Number three, on the relevance of social structure and of cultural factors in as far as they concern women in the general development of society. So we also have to take into account the relevance of social structure and cultural factors. So these are the three themes the writer stresses on when we take into account development and women. So, number one, she takes up the first theme here. What is it? That about the adequate database, about their status, about their role. Now, she talks about that there is underreporting of women's work in the census. We have taken this into account, that census methodology has failed to record the work of women, and that goes into the household economy, particularly women staying at home. She's not talking of women working outside their homes, but also women working in their household. So there has been underreporting of women's work in the census. And other surveys, they cause difficulty in making cross-cultural, interregional, strata-wise, urban-rural comparison within the country. Another difficulty is when we talk about in the census, who is the head of the family? Even though women is responsible for running the household and everything and taking all the decisions, still she is not recorded as the head of the family. So her contribution is negated over here. She talks about that many programs which are started up in the rural areas, they have been directed exclusively towards men. This non-recognition of women's crucial role in economy has resulted in failure of these programs, and at the same time has also contributed to the perpetuation of sexual inequality, or even to the deterioration of the position of women. So here the writer is taking up all the important issues about development of women. Before taking up and implementing various programs for development of women, we have to take into account that these are the important issues. Now the writer talks of the negative effects of development on women's situation. That has been seen in many areas. So what is the writer talking of here? She is giving the examples of the factory laws which are implemented for the improvement of the workers' conditions or the working condition as such, but they have often resulted in the retrenchment of women workers. Here, she gives other examples also of maternity leave, night shifts, creches, and all these issues. Here, they are related to the reproductive and child rearing function of women. They have acted adversely towards the employment of female workers at the expensive proposition for the employers. So this has resulted in a decline of female employment in the textile mills in India, as this is a case in point. So we can see this example that we find of the decline of female employment, that women are leaving these jobs because they feel uncomfortable due to these laws. Now, the writer takes up the issue that another very important thing to be taken into notice is that capital-intensive sector women, they are not given equal jobs as such, but they are assigned low-paid, unskilled jobs, and they are maintained as reserved workforce. So here, women and children are found, particularly in what areas? We find them as domestic service, we find them in cottage industries, and in informal sectors in general. So development of capitalist production has thus brought about suffering to women. So now the writer takes up the third theme which she had mentioned earlier, the need for taking into consideration the cultural and social structural variations for development planning for women cannot be overemphasize. So we have to pay attention to various other things also when we talk of development of women. Rules of inheritance, we have to take into account family structure, marital residence, seclusion, segregation. So these are the issues which will help us. They are also relevant for understanding the situation of women. And so filling in the gaps between the lawyer's law and the reality is essential for real development. So the writer has come to this conclusion that when we talk about development for women or with women as such, so we can say we have to take into account all these issues, all these important themes. Only then real development will be resultant, or it will be the answer. By and large, women's problems do not have a compelling character because women are essentially a category and not a group which can be easily mobilized. But now the writer is also bringing our attention to very important vice of the society, which we cannot keep a blind eye to. So here she says that in the Indian context, it would be unrealistic to say that men as actors in the social system are wholly responsible for the social evils that affect women. But on the other hand, women are also much responsible for creating obstacles to change. They don't want to change with the changing times, and they are creating hurdles or hindrance towards this development and growth. So enlargement. So what is the answer to this? So we have to change the mindset of people. We have to work towards the enlargement of women's consciousness and investment of social purpose in their lives appear to be the prerequisite of development. So all the inequalities and exploitation will have to be exposed. The answer is that we have to expose all the women's the inequalities and exploitation, and the women's point of view injected into critical areas of planning and development. So here she gives a very understanding insight into this field of development and the implementation of new ideas and new rules for the development of women, because until and unless women are also a part of this planning session where they know what are the problems that women face. So until and unless this is done, development in the real sense would be incomplete. It would never reach the real people where it should. So here in this chapter, the writer has taken up, she's spoken about women and development, taking it up from the very beginning, how the changes have taken place, how this issue has gained prominence as such, and now she has also brought our attention towards important issues related to development and women and the changes that we have to do, or the important aspects that we should pay attention to while planning for the development of women. Now, this series of the lecture, here I have spoken about the chapter where Leela Dubey is talking about women and development. In my next video, I'll be talking about the various questions and the vocabulary section in the chapter. Thank you.